This is Curious Minnesota, a Star Tribune project that sends staff from the state's largest newsroom hunting for the answers to great questions we receive from you. We're here to answer everything you want to know about the state's people, places, and culture. I'm your host, Erica Pearson. And this episode is sponsored by Minnesota Credit Union Association. Today, we are headed to the small town of Sandstone, Minnesota. It's near the Kettle River in the eastern part of the state, and one of the things that's really neat about this place are the ruins of old rock quarries that were running back in the 1800s and the early 1900s. These days, the rock walls and the piled ruins of these old quarries bring in hikers, rock climbers, and even ice climbers, including myself once, in the winter. And we're talking about this history today because Carol Scanney in Palm Springs, California, contacted us. Carol grew up in Minnesota and spent time in Moose Lake, a town north of Sandstone, and said that she's always been curious about this beautiful place with its unique history. Reporter Christa Lawler looked into this one for us. Thanks for being here, Christa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, I was actually really glad that Carol reached out to us about the quarries because I grew up in Wisconsin, just across the state line from the Sandstone area, and I knew that they had quarry days every summer, but I have always wanted to know more.
Yeah, and I was very excited to write about it because I had just been in Sandstone writing about what they call the Rock, which is the more than 100-year-old school that has long been abandoned, kind of in the heart of the city. And it's made of sandstone, and it is absolutely gorgeous. They've just turned it into apartments. So I had been spending a little bit of time in Sandstone and was excited to go back.
And the town of Sandstone itself is pretty small, right?
Yeah, it's about between 25 and 3,000, I would say. Very cute, very scenic. So obviously the city is named for its signature stone.
What came first, the town or the quarries?
Okay, so the town wasn't even in the same spot.
Oh.
The history of Sandstone is all tied around this quarry, but also around the railroads in this area. So it was actually James J. Hill who brought a railroad into the area and lifted up the city of Sandstone, moved it to an entirely different spot so that it would be closer to his railroad, because that's the kind of thing you can do
when you are a giant railroad baron. Wow. So tell me about how you reported this one.
This was very fun. So I drove to Banning State Park, which is actually it has a well-maintained 1.8-mile trail. And you'll come across various ruins from this period. And you can just see sandstone, including the grooves in the sandstone from where it was blasted. So they would obviously drill into a rock, put powder down there, start it on fire, blast the rock out. So there's all these various stations along this path that you can find. The most exciting one for me was the powerhouse, which is right along the Kettle River. And it is this massive structure. It's very regal. And it has like cutout windows that are kind of arched. And you can get right down in there. It's basically an urban explorer's dream. Like you can just crawl around on this rock and see exactly what they were doing more than 100 years ago.
I love it.
So I went back home after being at Banning thinking I had seen everything. But then I kind of started to get a hint that I had not seen everything as I was poking around more online. So I ended up calling the Sandstone History and Art Center, which is kind of in the heart of downtown, also a sandstone building. And they were awesome. Like these were the coolest people. They're volunteers. I met with their president of their board, who is Todd Sandell. He's lived in the area forever, hugely tied to the community, and knew the story backward and forward. So it was great.
That is cool.
I spent probably like 2 to 3 hours at the History Center in addition to going to Robinson Park, which is actually also within the city limits, also on the Kettle River. And this also has some kind of falling down structures. It's got a derrick still up, maybe one of the last in the region.
What is a derrick?
They kind of look like telephone poles, and they have huge cords coming off of them. And they were used to hoist the sandstone from where it was blasted from the quarry in a rail car to another part of the park where it would then be shaped using these different tools that were actually made on site by blacksmiths working on site.
So interesting. Tell us a little bit about what the stone looks like, because when you picture sandstone, you think of it being like kind of crumbly, but this isn't exactly, right?
No, it's textured, right? It's not a smooth surface. But the most significant thing about it is the color, obviously, which is this kind of salmony, pinkish color that is really beautiful.
Wow. And what was the sandstone used for at the time? What was like the market for it?
The sandstone is used for bridges and buildings and all sorts of structures. In sandstone alone, if you just drive down the road, you can see tons of places where they use the sandstone, including, like I said before, the old school, which honestly is the most breathtaking example of it that I've seen in my time in sandstone. But again, I was at the History Center, which is made of sandstone. There are buildings all around the state. There was a library in Des Moines that used Kettle River sandstone. And in 1975, they needed to make repairs. They got permission from the city of Sandstone to go back and get more sandstone to help with the repairs. It ended up being the last sandstone taken from that area, quarry.
Wow. Wow. So tell me a little bit about what you learned about the quarry's history, like when they first opened and how it started developing.
Okay, so it started with a man named William H. Grant. Kind of around 1885, he had some property near Sandstone, and he decided to start extracting sandstone from the quarry. The business peaked in 1910.
Did the quarry owners make a lot of money?
So a lot of the people who were involved with the quarries were big names in Minnesota. You get the Hill family. So yeah, these were wealthy human beings who continued to stay wealthy.
I get it. Like they were dabbling in all of these kind of different ways to make money in Minnesota. And that was one way that they like capitalized on the moment when people wanted sandstone.
But it had really slowed down by 1930 when operations pretty much ceased. And over that period of time, there were a ton of different owners, probably at least 6 or 7. It would change hands here and there. And this was not the easiest business. It's expensive. It was kind of boom or bust.
Mm-hmm. That is really interesting to know about the owners, but I'm also curious about the workers who spent their days in these quarries. The work itself was pretty dangerous, from what I understand, and we'll get into some of that history after the break. We're back, but before we continue our conversation, I wanted to tell you that this podcast is produced by Melissa Townsend and the music is by Matt Gilmer. Okay, so how many people worked in these quarries?
Hundreds. At the peak, maybe 600 men would be at various stations in the quarry. And they're honestly the more interesting part of the story, because this is a lot of people moving to Sandstone to work kind of like in the mines on the Iron Range, where you're all just kind of working together. They had jobs like blacksmiths. Some of them were shaping stone. Some of them were doing the blasting and the drilling. So it was a whole wealth of people. I heard such great stories about the men, including one of my favorite stories is they'd be down in this quarry and the lunch whistle would go and the men would scurry up ladders up the stone wall to head back to Sandstone for their 30-minute lunch break. Like the idea of that is...
Yes, yes. It gives you almost this Fred Flintstone kind of like they blow the whistle. It's lunchtime, right? It's
not a pterodactyl that's blowing the whistle, but yes. So that's a cool story. But then this is also dangerous work, right? So at the Sandstone History and Art Center, they have a recording made in the 1980s by a local reporter who interviewed 2 men who had worked in the quarry. I think they were both blacksmiths. And like that they have this video is... I mean, it's unbelievable. It is the story straight from the mouths of the men who work down there. And they were telling a story. One of the men was telling a story about they were carrying the black powder used to blast. And one of the men was smoking a pipe.
Oh, my goodness.
And an ash went in there, blew up the whole thing, killed the other guy, significantly burned the smoker, which kind of led me on a rabbit hole of like the other ways that you can die working in a quarry. And they're kind of the things that you would think of, like you might fall off the wall, Or there was one instance where a man had some gravel caught and he went to kind of shake it free from this chute, and then later they found just his legs sticking out of the rock. And I'm not trying to be crass about this, but I mean, it's very dangerous work, but they're fascinating ways to die in a quarry.
Yeah, yikes, that is intense. And it sounds like it was really a dangerous job.
Yeah.
So what happened in the end? Why were these quarries abandoned, and did everyone just lose their jobs kind of all at once?
So around the 1930s, steel and concrete moved into favor and were kind of the kings. The quarries were basically just abandoned. And Todd at the History Center was telling me that, like, at times they just left their tools behind. So a lot of people were searching for like scrap metal and stuff like that around World War II to sell. And people just came in and scavenged through the quarry sites and took what they could find. But you can still find things. You can find like the little loop hangers used to hoist the sandstone out of the quarry. You can still see that in some places. Or you can see these pegs that are kind of used that you can pound on. I saw a coil from a derrick that's just like peeking out of the brush at Robinson Park.
That's so interesting. Well, I'm wondering if there was anything else that stood out to you or like surprised you as you were working on this.
I was just shocked that all of this history is in this place. I travel between Minneapolis and Duluth regularly, and I never turn off in Sandstone just because there's not a quick trip there.
Yeah. And Hinckley gets all the Tobies. People stop at Hinckley. Yeah.
Yes, right. So I never stop in Sandstone. But between the old school and the people I met at the History Center and these gorgeous views, I mean, this is gonna become like destination for me. While I was there, I couldn't wait to bring my family there.
And Sandstone today is really trying to build this adventure, outdoors tourism. And in fact, you ran into my ice climbing guide, Tony Vavrica. He runs a different business in the summer, taking folks whitewater rafting.
Right. That was really coincidental because in addition to the ice climbing, there is the Kettle River right there, which is 80 miles long. And he was pulling inflatables out of the water that day with a group that he had taken on this water adventure. And he hinted at the fact that, yes, the past of Sandstone is fantastic, but there's also a future in Sandstone, and it's this kind of adventuring.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Christa. This was super interesting.
Thank you. I had a blast. I loved this whole journey.
Very cool. Well, thanks also so much to Carol in Palm Springs, who was curious about the history of Sandstone's quarries. That is it for us today, but you can read all of our curious stories online at startribune.com, and I'm hoping that this inspired you to send us a question. Send an email and tell us what you're curious about to curious@startribune.com. And in the meantime, stay curious.